And then down on the bottom, there's some examples of specialty pruning. Pleaching is a term that actually means the shaping of a plant, but typically is referred to making a tree form out of something that wasn't. Okay, so generally when we say something is pleached, it's because we made a tree out of it. Okay, we cut away the lower stand up when I first got here, and they kept falling over and they dried out, so they lost a lot of leaves and stuff on the bottom. So I had to cut the dead limbs off of the bottom, so the top part is all fine now, but I pleached them in order to salvage the plant. Just takes harder to sell because it doesn't have leaves all the way to the ground. So, but it did salvage the plant. Hopefully somewhere I'll find a home for it. What's next? Pollarding, something you rarely see actually. It is a style of pruning where you prune something like skeletonization, where you prune it back to the same spot all the time. These crepe myrtles down here in the shopping center, if they would quit murdering them, you could almost call them pollarding, but it's not quite because they're not doing it intentionally. But pollarding will make like a knuckle where they keep pruning it. And so it's a kind of a created shape out of the wood, where the wood just keeps adding mass each year and they keep pruning to the same spot to get that mass. And eventually they'll let it grow, so you'll have these big knuckles on the plant. It's kind of an art form. Braiding is more of an art form than it is a pruning. You take, they do it with tropical hibiscus a lot. When the plants are small, they take the young twigs and they intertwine them and make a braid out of the trunk. Okay, and then as it grows, it gets woodier and gets older, it all grows together and fuses and becomes one thing. So that's more of an art form than pruning. Then you have topiaries and espaliers. Topiaries, spirals, pom-poms, things like that, poodle balls. That's all manual pruning, done to shape it, to make it look like that. All very high maintenance. You have to do it every year to keep them looking good. So if you want low maintenance in your landscape, don't put a topiary in or don't make a topiary. They're neat and they're interesting, but they are maintenance. Espalier is basically meaning flat against a surface, flat on the wall, flat on the fence, something like that. They do it with fruit trees a lot, camellias sometimes, pyracantha, anything they want to train something flat up on the wall. So those are art forms, so to speak, and also pruning techniques. Okay, any questions to this point?
Like your crepe myrtles,
Mm-hmm.
we all myrtle on crepe myrtles.
Okay.
I mean, that's how we do it in the tidewater area.
Well, a lot of people, yeah.
Yeah. Well, furthermore, if I want to get away from that,
Mm-hmm.
and I've got the normal ball up there,
Mm-hmm.
it's much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get away from the murdering of it, but I want to reshape it.
Right.
How do I start? Do I just cut it off right there, or do I go down lower?
Well, it depends exactly where the buds are pointing
Okay.
on the branch.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Let's say this is the bud I want to take over. I would cut it right above here if this branch is pointing in the direction that I want.
Okay.
Okay. If not, then this bud over here, maybe this one's pointing where I want it, so I would cut it right above that one.
Right.
So,
Well, I've got the one up close to the house.
okay.
I'm trying to figure out how to demurterize it.
Okay. A little bit we can show you, maybe I can show you in the examples over here. We'll start setting a couple. Fixing trees like that have been murdered, you have to evaluate the number of branches. When you need to probably thin some of them out,
Right.
and you may have to take the branch all the way down low so that you have a remaining X number of trunks to sprout the tree from. And you're going to take out whichever ones are the weakest, the narrowest crotches, or crossovers, duplicates of other branches, or the ones that provide the least amount of impact to the plant. Once you select out and thin out the stuff that's unneeded, then you go to the specific branches, and then you start cutting them back to the point to where you want to create your new branches. Okay, so and it could be, depending on how big the plant is, I mean, way up there, it could be down low. That doesn't really matter, but you're looking for structure. Okay, now this is obviously a single stem, but crepe myrtles typically are multi-stems.
Right.
So let's start with that. Let's start with this. I worked on this a little bit the other day in the last class. Wouldn't be a pruning class without crepe myrtles. Okay, now, first things you got to realize is one, what is my objective for this plant? Now, being this is inventory on the sales yard, obviously I'm not going to be doing a rejuvenation or something like that where I'm cutting it really hard. My goal is to make the tree bigger, okay, so I'm going to be doing more like the thinning, okay, and try to stimulate growth out over the top. Now, being a crepe myrtle, where the old flowers were, this wood is dead anyways at the very top, and it'll sprout from below that. If you're ever not sure if a branch is alive or dead, simply scratch it with your thumbnail. Okay, you see the green? Okay, you see the green where I scratched it? Okay, if it's green, it's alive. Okay, if it's not, it's dead. Okay, pretty simple. Okay, so as long as you have green in the branch, it's alive. Okay, so then we're going to say, okay, now you don't necessarily have to take off all the little twiggy stuff, okay, so long as it's not compromising the structure. Now this stuff that goes shooting to the inside is going to be a crossover. Okay, it's going to cross over these other branches. That thing's going to shoot through here, crisscross this one, and all these. Okay, so inside branching, we're going to cut that stuff away right off the top. And sometimes, you know, crepe myrtles, you know, you can take them with your fingers when they're little twiggy stuff, no big deal. Okay, so this one's damaged already, so we're taking
Now, do
it
you
off.
cut that really close and cut the branch collar off so it won't?
No, right above the branch collar.
Oh, still
Same,
right above it.
right above. Okay, you'll find that when you're pruning, the more you do, it's almost, you have to go out of your way to cut the branch collar. And the more likely to cut a branch collar will probably be on a bigger branch where you're using a saw. Whereas a pruning shear, it has a certain amount of buffer zone that only gets you so close. Okay, and so usually it'll slide right outside the branch collar and you're fine.
Now, will those grow back, the ones you just snipped off, and you'll have to keep pruning them? or-
Well, it depends a little bit on what all I do to the plant. Now, my goal for this plant is to grow taller and become a tree. Okay, so I'm trying to discourage some of this lower stuff. And so there may be a few suckers and a few sprouts down there. Now, I can tell you this plant was pruned last year, so all this stuff here, that was all regrown last year, so yes, it will. Okay, and the bigger it gets, the less of that it will do, and the more growth will go on the outside. Okay, but here we've got an inside branch again, and it's duplicating this branch, so let's take that out. Okay, now I didn't get that real close, and you can turn it upside down. So, but if you're not certain, you can always cut twice. Okay, now look at here. This is where it was pruned last year. Okay, and it didn't die, but this branch took over. Okay, so this one here has now been a chopped off nub, okay, that didn't perform well, so we're going to take that out. Okay, so now we have a nice straight trunk, okay, and this one I've already cut the tip on. And if you look, the bud is right there, so I cut the tip to the outside. Okay, so same thing here. This one here, a little leery in the middle. Depends. This is kind of competing a little bit, but we'll see. But we definitely going to take that kind of stuff out. This one here, competing into this branch. All these things here, we don't need any of that. Now this branch here, as a whole, I'm probably going to remove it because I don't need it. I want to get the growth up here, so I'm going to take this guy out completely. And you'll find that if you have any nubs, just kind of like this one here, I expected that to be dead, but it wasn't. Like, see, here's another one. Okay, here's one that was pruned last year. These grew out of it. This one survived also, but this is a weak branch. Look how it's, okay? So we're going to take that out and get it as tight as we can, okay? Now, unfortunately, there's a bud right in there, which means that could sprout again there. So sometimes I'll knock that bud off. Okay, so kind of inhibit it from sprouting a little bit. But the stuff in the middle, you know, we want to clean all that out. Okay, all that stuff, it can go away. The duplicate stuff, you get two branches going in the same spot, take the weaker out. Okay, little stuff here, we clean all that up. Now, like I say, you don't necessarily have to clean all this little twiggy stuff out, but I'm trying to force growth up the tree. Now, if I leave all that stuff, those branches will get a little thicker this year. And all these branches will put out new flowers. Now, just like with pinching, if I have 60 branches on this thing, I'm going to have 60 flowers. Okay, if I have 20 branches, I'm going to have 20 flowers. Same amount of energy in the plant, which flower is going to be bigger? The 20. Okay, so by pruning like this, you end up with bigger flowers. Okay, get nice flower clusters. If you didn't prune it, you get a lot more branches, but the flowers are going to be smaller versus bigger. Okay, you'll have more of them. You'll probably have a similar show, but this is a little more impressive. Okay, which is one of the reasons why people prune crepe myrtles. Okay, so this guy here, we're trying to lift it up. This is kind of a weak branch. And see this one here, this whole branch is behind these others. Okay, this particular grower discovered that it's cheaper and faster for them to put in more cuttings in a pot, and they can grow the same thing and get them all of in more equal size than it is to put one branch in and prune it to try to make it fuller. They can grow the plant in less number of years with less expense that way than by pruning. Okay, so that's why you've got 4 separate plants in here. Although don't try to divide them because the roots are going to be all intertwined. Okay, so this one here, we want to try to get this thing up, so we're going to get that. Okay, and then we want this to go towards the outside, so I'm going to find a bud on the outside. And we'll go right below that one. Now, one of the reasons why I cut the tips on this dogwood this size is these branches are not but so thick. And if they're going to hold a nice big flower bud on that branch is going to end up breaking because the bud's going to be too heavy, particularly when it gets rained on. So that's why I try to reduce the size a little bit when I'm pruning something like that. Now here we got one crossing over, we got this guy crossing over, this guy and this guy are kind of duplicates. Okay, so this one here is the weaker of the two, so that one's going to go away. Now this one, I don't want it to come completely over this way, I'd like to redirect it some. So let's try to get it pointing out, so we'll find a bud that's on this outside if we can. Again, we'll cut it to there so that we can get it growing out this way. Okay, so our object is to grow away from the middle and to the outside. Okay, now this one here, let's say we wanted to leave this one here. So we'll put it to a bud out there, and this one here is going to come to a bud in the opposite direction. Okay, now the more you do it, the faster you can get at it. Okay, see,
Is it safe to do a new nursery tree?
Sure.
Or can you overcut?
Oh, sure.
I mean, if
Oh, yeah, you can overcut. I mean, you can.
should you spread that out over a couple of years? If
Well, not necessarily, no. But yes, you can overcut by cutting too hard. So like I say, I wouldn't want to do a rejuvenation on this because I wouldn't be
Right.
able to sell it this year. You know, I'd have to regrow it for next year. Maybe if I went from this size to a rejuvenation, it might take me a couple of years to resell it. So it just depends a little bit on your immediate goal. But as far as pruning on nursery, sure. Yeah, I got 3 gallon plants, crepe myrtles out there from last year. So far, I only pruned one of them because I had to bend all the way to the ground. I'm gonna bring me a cart out there. I can set it up on a cart and then I got to bend over. And I'll prune the rest of them. Okay, but right now, yeah, and then they bloom because they bloom on new wood, so it's not a problem. So that's kind of what you do. You take out little stuff like this. It's not so good. We've got, see here, we've got one that didn't make it. And you take that out. Okay, and so that's what you do. You just pick and choose so that in the end, you know, you've got an overall balance, a little bit of a canopy. I tend to make it a little higher in the middle and let it graduate out some because in nature it's going to kind of grow that way. And I like for stuff to be filling in empty spaces. And when, like I say, when you have duplicates in here, this one here is growing from the underside and wrapping all over the branch. That's not so good, so we're going to take that guy out. I don't need this guy either. We're going to take him out. Okay, and then I got to look and say, okay, this one's not real strong yet, and how is it compared to the others that I have? So maybe I'll take it down to here because it's a little heavier branch and it'll be better to hold. Little twiggy stuff like this breaks too easy. So I'm at least going to cut that stuff off. And chances are, I think I'll get rid of that whole thing. It's not important. And I've got these branches coming in place. This one here just needs to be shortened a little bit because it's too spindly. So you got a dead nub here on the tip of this one. I didn't get it off, so we cut it twice. Okay, so do I want this? Do I want this? This one's a little tighter. I like this one a little better, but it's also a little further out on the plant compared to the overall plant. Okay, so I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to take this one off. It is also the weaker. And then I'll take this one and try to point it in this other direction somewhere. And look where the buds are. Okay, and then pretty much you got nearly a finished plant. Now you got to say, okay, this is a little taller. Now I just need a little balance. So I'll go back and touch up some of these for balance. I have my glasses on, so sometimes I'm feeling where the buds are. Okay, so a little bit of balance. Okay, so now it's a little better balanced. Okay, so now you got a little bounce with the plant too. So overall, when you look at it, it looks pretty much relatively symmetrical. And that's what you're after, good outward branching, cleaned up. All these branches should hold flowers pretty well. Now, unfortunately, we kind of pruned on our plants all along as we go, so I don't have any really crappy things I can bring in to show you. But this is a ligustrum. This is one of the common plants that are made for hedges, and this is one that they use this guy on. Although this guy ain't gonna prune much because it's dull as doorknobs and it needs to be tightened up because it's sitting okay. So, but people go through there and cut, and when they do, they go shear. And what happens? Half of those leaves are cut off, okay? Yeah, they get the branch that they wanted, but they get some leaves too. Okay, I would much rather, and when I do use these, you see me using just the tips, snip, 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 with just the tips. Okay, but better off with a hand pruner. Go down and see, this guy's way up here, and it's coming from way down in there. So let's go down in here and prune it down there so it'll flush out down there, keep it nice and full.
You go all the way down to the joint?
Somewhere down in there. You can go as far as you want. If you go all the way to the very stem, you might get sprouts from them, or it may not even sprout.
Okay.
But so I went down to about 6 inches, something like that. Say this one here. Maybe we'll go. Now another thing I do when I prune, okay. First thing I do is I grab the branch I want to prune, because even without looking, I can tell when my pruners are on that branch. I can feel it. So if I'm on the wrong branch, I can't tell, I don't feel connection, so I know I'm on the wrong branch. And sometimes when you're in a lot of congested pruning and it's hard to see, use your sense of touch is a very valuable tool. So sense of touch when I know I get it, and then I prune. Now, other thing that you notice is that when I put my shears on a plant, I slide it down to the branch. Okay, and slide it down to the next branch, and then I make my cut. And see, the purpose of that is, if you look inside the plant where the cut is right close to the bud, okay, which is the good cut, right? Which is that cut right there. So when you put it on the branch, you slide it down till you feel the leaf, and you cut, and you got it, okay? Then you don't have to cut twice. Okay, a little bit of sense of touch, okay? And you can take this guy here, and I push back so I can see sometimes. Okay, and then I go in and I slide right to that edge. And I'm knocking a couple leaves off on that one, but they're still small. And now this plant really didn't need a lot of pruning, but that's kind of what you do. Okay, you can take this thing and you just slide down to the next notch, and you know you're at the top of a bud, so you got a good clean cut. Okay?
Question.
Huh?
I have this flat portion over here that are dead.
Mm-hmm.
Where can I cut it?
If it's dead, you cut it completely off.
And that's where I make.
And if this whole branch is dead, then I would cut it completely off. I'd go all the way down there and cut it completely off if it was dead. Yeah, dead wood cut out is all the way back. If it's dead, it goes away. Because then it'll fill in faster once it's cleared.
I'm gonna fill in.
Mhm. Yep. And the lower you need to force growth, the harder you need to prune. If you just need growth on the top, then just prune a little on the top. That's where your growth is going to be. But if you need some growth down there, you've got to take some of these branches further back in order to get that growth to occur at a lower point in the plant.